It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, this next question, Brian, is from Joseph. Joseph says, I'm 25 and single. I'm currently renting and saving for a down payment. Should I keep the flexibility of renting or get into a house soonish? I like my job and I plan to stay around for at least 5 years. And I think that there are young folks all over the country asking this question right now. Man, I see what's going on. Should I just go ahead and get on this wave of what's happening with real estate? What are some things that you would encourage Joseph to think about, who's 25, he likes his job, and he's single? Like, what are some things he ought to be using to inform and make his decision?
Oh man, Bo, you're probably going to pick up the pieces because my brain goes in so many places when I hear this. Because look, I want to level with my young financial mutants who are watching this. It's one of those things. I'm a little annoyed with some macro things that are going on, and I'm going, like I said, I'm going to leave the meat on the bone for you to answer that part. But I think it's worth educating our audience on knowing some of the things I'm concerned about. Look, we all want to get in our first house. I think it is so cool. And Joseph, you're checking the box on the fact you're going to be there at least 5 to 7 years, because we tell you it's no-go territory if you know you're moving in the next few years. I will tell you there is a little red flag in the fact that he's single, and I always get nervous whenever you find a significant other. Are they going to judge, are they going to ever feel like it's their place?
Sure.
I mean, because that's something, I know that sounds really crazy, but it's true. I've had so many, like I have a couple, very successful couple, but they met later in life, and every financial planning meeting we have, she complains about how horrible the house that's paid for that they still live in, but she doesn't feel like it's her house
because it's not theirs. It was his.
So that's one red flag. But here's the thing that I think is facing all young people right now, and it bothers me. You've always had to compete with investors, meaning that when you're trying to buy your first primary residence, you know that there's people out there, because when you're looking at starter homes, this starter homes very easily could be rental property too. And you're like, well, I got to compete against those rental property folks. But in the past, historically, you had an advantage because the banks would give you a lower interest rate because you're living in the house. It will be your primary residence. Because investors were buying rental property and there's more risk, the banks underwrote them at a much higher interest rate than you paid. So that actually kept the market at what I consider a somewhat fair place, because the market was actually driving. You got a better deal because you're going to live in it. You're going to have skin in the game. This is what you're counting on for shelter. The investor who's taking more risk and could walk away from it, the bank's going to say, hey, to protect myself, I'm going to charge this investor more money. That historical norm has been disrupted because what we have now is we have institutions. And look, BlackRock is the one that's on all the brochures, but it's more. I get emails constantly from people saying, hey, do your clients want to get into institutional investing and residential property? Because this is going on. And here's the problem. They're getting rates at the same rate or even cheaper than you are going to have access to as a primary residence. I don't like that. I think that creates a very unfair atmosphere for all of my financial mutants who are trying to get into the same opportunity I had, you had, and it's a little, I don't like the government to get involved in things, but it bothers me that a norm of being able to reach this dream of having a house that's yours, it feels like it's running away from, and a lot of these price increases that you're also seeing are being distorted because interest rates are being held super low artificially. Now you have institutional investors who don't care. They think all things are a nickel because they have all this money coming in. It is distorting the marketplace in a lot of ways. So I'll throw the question over to you. What should a 25-year-old who's got all these things going on, what is your guidance to them?
There are obviously very unique macroeconomic things going on right now. And frankly, there always will be some sort of unique macroeconomic thing. That just happens to be what ours are right now. Whenever it comes to making a housing decision, it's a big decision. Like for most folks, buying a house is the single most expensive decision they will ever make. And so there's sort of a checklist you got to go through before you say, okay, yes, I should do this. You're 25 and you've already answered one of them, right? You said, I really like my job. Odds are I'm not going to change jobs in the next 5 years because I like where I am. I like my commute. I like my proximity. All that stuff matters. The next question you have to ask is, okay, well, what other things might happen in my life that could affect whether this house makes sense. And some of the common ones are, do I think that I might be getting married in the next couple of years? Do I think that I might be having kids or having more kids in the next couple of years? You want to be careful because right now on your employment situation, you may say, oh yeah, this place is great, right? Because I'm going to work here for 5 years. You may have other non-work things happen like kids or families or that kind of stuff take place that would make your house no longer the perfect house for you. And it could potentially become an illiquid asset if we were to see some sort of like downturn or softness or that sort of thing. So you have to make sure that actually owning a home makes sense for where you are, age and stage of life. Now you can get into the mathematics of it and get into thought process of it. The first thing that we always stand by is when it comes time to make a housing decision, you want to make sure that the cost of your housing, that mortgage payment or that rent, does not exceed 25% of your gross income. You want to make sure that you stay below that threshold so that when you do buy, you're buying a house that you can afford. Now, since you're 25 and you're currently a renter, I'm going to assume that this is your very first home purchase. One of the really unique things that I think is unique to our show that you won't hear other financial folks say is we love when people put 20% down on a home. We think that it makes a lot of sense so that you have equity in the house, you don't come underwater, you have a controllable payment, you don't pay PMI. However, for someone who's young and they've been able to answer all the other questions about lifestyle and job circumstance and that sort of thing, 20% might be a hard goal to attain, especially if you live in a really hot real estate market where prices keep getting more expensive, because by the time you save that 20, the house might be 30% more expensive. So for your first time home purchase, we give you some latitude that you don't have to put 20% down. Maybe you only put down 3.5% or 5% or 10%. You figure out what number makes sense for you and still keeps the payment inside of the 25% of your income, and I think that you can make that decision. But before you ever get to the mathematics of it, I think you have to get to the life circumstance situation of it to determine just how valuable is the flexibility of renting. Because I fell prey to this, and I have a lot of friends who say, I'm never going to rent because I'm just throwing money away. Well, if you come from a real estate market that we came from and you live through an event like 2008, like the Great Recession, you'll recognize that, yeah, rent, you may not be building equity, but it is better to not build equity than to potentially build negative equity because you have to sell a house in a bad real estate market, or maybe you can't sell the house. So I don't think flexibility is a horrible thing to keep in your corner if it makes sense for your life circumstance and life situation.
I like how we tag team that. I was the old man on the porch, and then you actually got to get in there and give the teachable moments.
Oh yeah, I'm the young man in the front yard. You're the old man on the porch, the young man in the front yard.
Get off that yard.
All right, that's a fantastic old man impression.